The new Disney Plus TV show AHSOKA has been very highly anticipated and has a lot of expectations weighing on it from the Star Wars fan base. After many disappointing outings and a lot of fan blaming at the end of the day, a lot of fans are really clamoring to see something new, something fresh that can finally unite the fan base. Well, I've seen the first two episodes of the new AHSOKA show, and I have some thoughts. I don't think this episode's going to have a lot of spoilers in it. There might be a few things to watch out for, so if you haven't seen the first two episodes, probably go watch those before you watch this video. If you're like me and you don't particularly care about Star Wars after all this time and you just want to know whether it's good or bad, well, this video is probably for you. So this is just the warning for anybody who hasn't seen the show and doesn't want to have any sort of tainting ideas on it. This is your chance to dip out. But let's get started. Now, I'll admit that I didn't expect much from this show because honestly, I don't care. I've given up on Star Wars as a whole as of these last couple years because I feel disinterested as a fan. They've insulted us and they've given us bad product. So I just have no reason to care about Star Wars anymore. However, I did happen to like this episode, or these first two episodes, a lot more than I did Mandalorian Season 3, or most of Mandalorian Season 2, or Obi-Wan Kenobi, or Andor, any of this other stuff that we've seen over the past couple of years. And AHSOKA actually impressed me in that it made me actually feel something with Star Wars in it for the first time. But I'm going to be discussing today on these first two episodes the positives and the negatives of these first two episodes. And I will be reviewing all of this at the end of the show once it's all finally aired. Since I'm going to be giving Lucasfilm more goodwill than they really deserve, we're going to start with the positives here. 1, the Rebels fans are really going to love this show. It's a nice homage to anybody who watched Rebels. It's going to be very reminiscent of that TV show that we all once loved when Disney first bought Lucasfilm. A lot of Rebels fans are really going to enjoy this. Another thing, the score is on point. I believe the guy's name is Kevin Kinnear. He comes back for the score from Rebels. And the music really feels like Star Wars once again. And I'm going to be saying this a lot in the positive area. The settings are very unique, very interesting, some kind of stuff that we don't really see a lot in Star Wars. And it's kind of good to feel something fresh and new, while also feel something old, like, you know, what we were used to with Star Wars, like the score. One thing I really enjoyed as well are the scene transitions, like the wipes and the circular wipes. And like these were all things that were missing in a lot of recent Star Wars material, were those scene transitions. The lightsabers feel like lightsabers again. Sometimes it's a little bit iffy, but this feels like a positive, that the lightsabers actually feel like they can do damage in this show. Unlike before, when they were basically like batons rather than blades. The fight scenes aren't that bad. I actually quite enjoyed the fight scenes in here. Now, I'm not saying that they're perfect, but they seemed like they were more choreographed and more enjoyable than before. The aesthetic and the setting kind of go hand in hand. Whenever there's villains on screen, it's very dark. It's very brooding. It's very, it's got this sense of evil towards it. When the good guys are on screen, you get that sense of light, joy, and happiness that comes with it. And I like that aesthetic. I like that this show gives you the feels and sort of this sense that Star Wars is still alive somewhere. That the feeling that George Lucas gives you when you first watch that original trilogy or the prequels sort of gives you that feeling. And this show has that in some areas. That score really does help. The villains, particularly Balin and Shin, are very interesting villains. I'm not going to speak too much on Morgan Elsbeth, but the villains feel like actual villains rather than sympathetic characters. So they feel threatening, they feel interesting, and there's something about Balin that has my attention, that I feel sort of gravitated towards as a fan of Jedi Sith, dichotomy. And we need more of that in Star Wars, or at least we needed it back in the day. I think it's a little bit, too little, too late in some areas. But there's a lot of new ideas that are ambitious and creative that it's like, well, this is kind of what Star Wars has needed for the longest time. And it feels like a good thing. It feels like one of the positives that this show has. And yeah, it feels like Star Wars in just a new way. It's like, for the first time in a long time, Star Wars feels new, fresh, and alive. Unfortunately, this is where we get to the negatives. You see, I talked a lot about the villains, the aesthetic, the setting, the music, but one thing this show lacks on is making you care about kind of the characters that are in the show. For example, this is a show about AHSOKA, but really it's a show about AHSOKA, Hera, and Sabine Wren, which essentially I compare it to Star Wars The Golden Girls. It's basically three women who are, bitching and moaning and complaining about finding men, Ezra and Thrawn. Most of those feelings that I mentioned before, the feels that they try to hit you with music and setting and aesthetic and all that, a lot of it's very manipulative, as it has been for the last 10 years with Star Wars. It's just manipulative, fan-baiting, key-jangling bullshit that they've been doing since The Force Awakens. I see past Dave Filoni. I see past all of it. I could eat that up and be like, oh, same flavor as last time. The cameos and the people who are, loving the cameos and love the Rebels, series, they're going to be clapping like a bunch of seals, loving this crap, praising it, praising Dave Filoni, when really it's nothing special. It's stuff that we should have gotten long, long time ago. This is absolutely a Filoni jerk-off session. It really is. It really is. It's all of his favorite characters getting in a circle and just doing their little thing under Kathleen Kennedy's umbrella. One of the big problems I had with this show was that it's a continuation of the show Rebels. You had to have seen Rebels to understand where this show's timeline is and the continuation of those characters and how they feel. Unfortunately, that kind of brings a problem to the stakes. I feel like there's a lot of very low stakes in this show. I don't think anybody's going to be affected. I don't think there's going to be any characters that we know that we love are going to be harmed or changed in any sort of way. It seems like there's no difference from this or any other Disney Plus show. It's a lot of inconsequential nothings, going on and on and on until the last episode. But to everybody who's sort of falling for the bait of cameos and like aesthetic and all that, they're like just clapping like seals and eating it up. There's a lot of bland characterization going on, and a part of that is because of the acting that goes on between Hera, AHSOKA, and Sabine. I hate to say it, but it's something just lame duck when it comes to them. The acting is not so great among all three of them. The CGI is not super great either, but it's way better than most of the other shit that goes on at Lucasfilm. They have a few lame attempts at adding the message and a lot of identity politics in this show, but unfortunately for them, it comes off as sloppy and kind of inconsequential to the overall story because nobody gives a shit about that stuff anymore. But once again, we are in a state where we realize, okay, there are more women in this show than there are male characters. Literally 2 male cast members, David Tennant and Ray Stevenson. One of them's a bad guy and one of them's a droid. This is obviously the Force's female stuff. There's no if, ands, or buts, about it, man. Like, this is it. This is Kathleen Kennedy's doing 100%. I don't care how much Dave Filoni's in on it. The story overall is just boring. It's just boring, busy work that's just like, we have to find Ezra, we have to find Thrawn, but first we have to go through all the busy work that the Rise of Skywalker had to get to just to find Palpatine. It's just boring, busy work, and it doesn't need to be included in a story. As fast as the story moves in terms of the characters, it doesn't move very fast in terms of my investment in them. And that's why there's a lot of feels, a lot of cameos, a lot of aesthetic, a lot of this, and that, part of the positives. that are desperate attempts to make you care again. I gave up on all these Dave Filoni characters a long time ago. I think the Rebels sort of era of Star Wars ran its course after the sequel trilogy. It really did. I liked parts of Rebels. I liked some of the ideas that were presented in Rebels, but I was not a huge fan of the overall show because of the execution. And therefore, I find it hard to sort of invest in the characters as they are now in a live action show versus where they were in an animated show where I really barely cared about them then too. The character that I'm most invested in is AHSOKA herself, but she's well past due in terms of how long she should have lived in this canon. Speaking of canon, the nonsensical logic that applies to the canon here in terms of, for example, the New Republic. We are constantly seeing that the New Republic is both, this sort of new hope that they've been trying to influence, like in their story. They keep saying the New Republic is the new sort of lifestyle of the Republic. It's, they have to break down the Empire to create a new Republic, if that makes sense. Well, they're constantly seen as incompetent at their jobs because they keep getting infiltrated by empirical remnants and empirical sympathizers. And we saw this back in season 3 of Mando. Most of the New Republic looks like a bunch of freaking idiots. No wonder they got overthrown by Palpatine and the First Order. Or was it Snoke and Kylo Ren? I don't freaking know anymore. And there's a lot of moments in the show where there's a lot of dumb choices made by characters like Sabine and AHSOKA that have convenient solutions that help them get out of the holes that they were once in. Now, I'm not going to go into full-on spoiler detail on most of what happens in the show, but here's what I've concluded. This is absolutely Star Wars: The Golden Girls. The feels are manipulative. The shiny lights and all the bright colors are just a big distraction for what deep down is, at the very core, a lame story with a lot of lame, low stakes. I don't think anything's going to change. I hope Lucasfilm burns for all the crimes it's done against creativity and imagination. And I hope AHSOKA doesn't save Star Wars. Do I think this show is enjoyable? It's a nice show to sort of sit down and turn off your brain and enjoy for old time's sake as a Star Wars fan. But if you're someone who's already disinterested in Star Wars and doesn't want to give Lucasfilm the benefit of the doubt, you'd be well enough just to sit this one out just as well. There's nothing to gain. There's nothing to make you feel that joy you once had long ago. All you can have now is the rotting flesh off of a dying corpse that has been rotting for the past 10 years in terms of Lucasfilm and Star Wars. Will Star Wars ever be saved? That's not for me to decide. But I am here to do an autopsy. Star Wars is a dead franchise. I'm sorry to tell all the Star Wars stans that, but it's the truth. And that will not change for as long as the management, yes, even Dave Filoni, still in charge. Lucasfilm needs a full-on house cleaning from Jon Favreau to Dave Filoni to Kathleen Kennedy to everybody at Lucasfilm before anything can change. That is just my hot take opinion right now off the bat after watching the first 2 episodes of AHSOKA. Let me know what your thoughts are down in the comments below. I am not done with Star Wars. This will not be my last video on Star Wars. I will be talking to everyone later on my thoughts on the rest of Star Wars. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you can, ring that notification bell. That'd be great to me. I know it's a small button for you, but it's a big deal for me. So thank you. Thank you for watching.